The crack of bone echoed in the cave like a rifle shot. Staff Sergeant Morgan Cross pressed her palm against the rock wall, her breath coming in ragged gasps that misted in the frozen air. Below her torn ghillie suit, blood pumped from her thigh in rhythmic spurts. Bright arterial red against the snow she tracked inside. The shrapnel jutted from the wound like a steel fang, each heartbeat sending white-hot fire through her leg. No morphine, no med kit, no backup. She pulled the K-bar knife from her belt, held it over the flickering Zippo flame. The blade glowed orange in the darkness. Outside the cave entrance, boot steps crunched through fresh snow. Getting closer. Morgan bit down hard on her rifle sling and lowered the glowing knife toward her own flesh. Some prices you pay in iron. The Korengal Valley stretched below like a scar cut into the earth's face. Staff Sergeant Morgan Valkyrie Cross adjusted her scope, watching heat signatures dance through the thermal view. 3,000 meters of hostile terrain separated her hide site from the target compound. "Wind's picking up," Master Sergeant Garrett Briggs muttered beside her. At 58, Iron Briggs had more deployment time than most soldiers had service years. His weathered face barely moved as he scanned through the spotting scope. 2.3 meters per second, gusting to 4. Call it 6 minutes of airtime at this range. Morgan didn't respond. Words were wasted breath at 1,200 meters. She tracked the reticle across the compound's central courtyard, where 3 men stood around a burning oil drum. Intel said the middle one was Commander Rashid Mahmoud, Taliban operations chief for the entire Kunar province. The morning sun hadn't yet touched the valley floor. Perfect. Thermal inversions played hell with long-range ballistics, but at dawn the air was stable, cold, predictable. "Target static," Briggs said. "Windows closing in 90 seconds when his security rotation cycles." Morgan's finger rested alongside the trigger guard of her M24. Not on it. Never on it until the moment demanded. Her father had taught her that before the army did. He'd been a sniper in Desert Storm, back when a 1,000-meter shot was considered legendary. Now she regularly doubled that distance. 70 seconds, Briggs counted. Weather report says storm front moving in by 1400. We take this shot, we exfil before the snow hits. Morgan calculated the angle, the distance, the 16 different variables that turned a bullet into fate. At this range, she had to account for the Coriolis effect, the actual rotation of the Earth beneath the bullet's flight. Most soldiers never fired a shot where the planet's spin mattered. She lived there. 50 seconds. Target's moving toward the vehicle. It's now or never, Valkyrie. Morgan's breathing slowed. 4 counts in. Hold. 4 counts out. Her heart rate dropped below 50 beats per minute. The world narrowed to the circle of her scope. The target lifted a satellite phone to his ear. She exhaled halfway and held. The crosshairs settled on his center mass. Time crystallized. Her finger moved to the trigger. The M24's report echoed across the valley like distant thunder. Morgan rode the recoil, her eye never leaving the scope. The bullet's trace was invisible, but she tracked it in her mind. A perfect parabola arcing through thin mountain air. 6 seconds of flight time. The target's chest exploded in a red mist. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings. "Solid hit," Briggs confirmed, his voice flat. Professional. But something was wrong. His eyes stayed pressed to the spotting scope. "Wait, Valkyrie, we've got..." The first mortar round hit 200 meters below their position. Morgan's training overrode surprise. She was already breaking down the rifle, muscle memory executing the sequence she'd practiced 10,000 times. Stock separation, barrel twist, bolt removal. 15 seconds from firing position to ruck ready. "They knew," Briggs snarled, yanking the spotting scope free from its mount. "They fucking knew we'd be here." Another mortar round impacted closer. The rock face shuddered. Shrapnel whined through the air like angry hornets. Morgan's mind raced through the implications. They'd been inserted 72 hours ago. Radio silence the entire time. Only 3 people knew their exact position. Them and the mission commander back at Fob Blessing, which meant the Taliban hadn't gotten lucky with their mortar fire. Someone had told them exactly where to aim. Move! Briggs was already scrambling toward the rappel point they'd established on the far side of the outcropping. Their escape route, a 100-meter vertical drop down the mountain's north face. Morgan shouldered her ruck and followed, her boots finding purchase on loose scree. Behind them, mortar rounds walked up the hillside in a textbook fire-for-effect pattern. Not random, not probing, directed. They reached the cliff edge as the next salvo screamed overhead. Morgan clipped into the rope, checked her descender, and stepped backward into empty space. The world inverted. Sky became ground, mountain became ceiling. She dropped fast, letting rope burn through her gloves in controlled falls. 15 meters, 30, 50. Briggs was 10 meters above her, moving with the smooth efficiency of a man who'd done this in a dozen different wars. Almost home, he called down. Another 40 meters and we're in the... The mortar round hit directly above them. Morgan saw the flash before she heard the sound. The concussion wave hit like a physical fist. The rappel anchor, a 2-inch bolt driven into solid rock, held for exactly 1 second. Then it failed. Gravity is the most honest force in nature. It doesn't care about training, experience, or how many confirmed kills you have. It pulls everything down at exactly 9.8 meters per second squared. Morgan fell. Her mind processed the situation in crystalline clarity. The rope had snapped at the anchor point. She was in free fall. Below her, the mountain face was a blur of rock and ice. Above her, Briggs's rope was still intact, but he was being dragged toward the edge by her weight on the shared anchor system. She had maybe 2 seconds before they both died. Her hand found the quick release on her harness. "Don't you fucking dare!" Briggs roared. Morgan pulled the release. The last thing she saw before she dropped away was Briggs's face, twisted with rage and grief and helplessness. Then she was falling free, the rope whipping away above her. The world became a kaleidoscope of sky and stone. She hit the first outcropping after 12 meters. Her left side took the impact. Ribs cracked like dry kindling. The pain was white-hot, immediate, all-consuming. But the impact also changed her trajectory, redirecting her fall from vertical to diagonal. She caromed off another rock face. Her helmet took most of it, but the whiplash snapped her head sideways. Stars exploded across her vision. Then she hit the snow-covered ledge. For a moment, there was nothing. No sound, no sensation. Just the vast, empty quiet that comes before your body remembers how to process pain. Then it all came flooding back. Morgan tried to breathe and felt something grind in her chest. Broken ribs, at least 2, maybe 3. Each breath was a knife in her side. She tasted copper, blood in her mouth, but not from internal bleeding. She'd bitten through her cheek on impact. She tried to move her legs. The left one responded. The right one screamed. Morgan lifted her head, looked down at her body. Her right thigh was pinned under a jagged piece of rock. No, not rock. Metal. A piece of shrapnel from the mortar blast, the size of her forearm, driven into her leg like a stake. Blood was already pooling in the snow beneath her. She reached for her med kit. Her hand found empty space. The ruck was gone, ripped away during the fall. No morphine, no trauma dressings, no hemostatic gauze. Above her, maybe 60 meters up the cliff face, she could hear Briggs shouting her name. His voice echoed off the rocks, distorted by distance and desperation. She tried to answer and could only manage a wet cough. Her radio was still clipped to her vest. She pulled it free, thumbed the transmit button. "Iron, I'm down, alive." Static. The radio's display was cracked, flickering. Then Briggs's voice came through, broken and fragmented. Copy. Status. Broken ribs. Shrapnel in right leg. Lost the ruck. She paused, assessed her situation with the cold detachment that had made her the best sniper in the battalion. Lost a lot of blood. Need immediate casevac. More static. Then, negative on birds. Storm front. 40 minutes. Can you move? Morgan looked at her leg again. The shrapnel had punched through her femur. She could see the bone, white and splintered, through the torn flesh. Every heartbeat sent another pulse of blood into the snow. Negative, she said. I'm pinned. The radio crackled. Coming down. Hold on. Negative. Morgan's voice was sharp despite the pain. You'll never make it with the mortars. They're still bracketing the cliff. As if to punctuate her words, another explosion echoed from above. Closer now. The Taliban were adjusting their fire, walking it along the ridgeline. I'm not leaving you, Briggs said. His voice was clear now, steady, final. That's an order, Master Sergeant. Fuck your order. Morgan almost smiled. Almost. Iron, listen to me. The mission's compromised. Someone leaked our position. You need to get back to FOB Blessing and find out who. That matters more than... Nothing matters more than bringing you home. The radio hissed with interference, then went dead. Morgan stared at the blank display for 3 seconds. Then she threw the useless brick into the snow. She was alone. Morgan forced herself to think. The shock would wear off soon, and then the real pain would start. She had maybe 10 minutes before the blood loss made her too weak to function. After that, she'd pass out. After that, she'd die. She needed to move. Now. The shrapnel was the problem. It had gone through her thigh and into the ground beneath, pinning her like a butterfly in a collection. She could try to pull it out, but that risked severing her femoral artery completely. She'd bleed out in under a minute, or she could cut around it. Morgan pulled her K-bar knife from its sheath. The blade was 7 inches of 1095 Crovan steel, sharp enough to shave with. Her father had given it to her the day she shipped out to basic training. Might save your life someday, he'd said. She pressed the blade against her thigh, just above where the shrapnel entered. The wound was already a mess of torn muscle and shredded fabric. She'd have to cut away enough tissue to work the leg free. The first cut was the hardest. Not because of the pain, though that was blinding, but because every instinct screamed against deliberately making the wound worse. She cut anyway. Blood welled up, hot against her frozen skin. She worked the knife deeper, sawing through muscle fiber and fascia. Her vision tunneled. Gray spots danced at the edges. Keep cutting. The blade scraped against bone. She adjusted the angle, cut parallel to the femur. The shrapnel shifted slightly. Not enough. She cut deeper. Her ghillie suit was soaked with blood now, the white snow around her turning crimson. She was vaguely aware of shouting somewhere above her. Briggs, still calling her name, but it seemed distant, unimportant. The world had narrowed to the knife and the wound and the next cut. Finally, the leg came free. Morgan collapsed backward into the snow, gasping. The pain was transcendent, beyond anything she'd experienced. Her vision whited out completely for several seconds. When it cleared, she was staring up at a gray sky. Snow had started to fall. Individual flakes drifted down, landing on her face. The storm was coming early. She forced herself to sit up. Her leg was a disaster. She could see clear through it in places, but it was mobile. That was all that mattered. She had no tourniquet, no bandages, no way to stop the bleeding except pressure. She tore strips from her ghillie suit, packed them into the wound until the fabric turned red and sodden. Then she wrapped more strips around the whole mess, pulling them tight enough to make her scream. It would have to do. Above her, the mortar fire had stopped. Either the Taliban had exhausted their ammunition, or they were repositioning. Neither option was good. If they'd stopped firing, it meant they were sending ground troops to confirm the kill. Morgan looked around, getting her bearings for the first time since the fall. She'd landed on a narrow ledge about 40 meters below the original rappel point. The cliff continued down another 100 meters to the valley floor. Above her, the route back up was impossible. Near vertical rock face, no handholds, and even if there were, she couldn't climb with her leg, which left only one option: down. She spotted a cave entrance maybe 20 meters below her current position. Just a dark slash in the rock face, but it would provide cover from both the storm and enemy observation. 20 meters, might as well be 20 miles. Morgan gritted her teeth, grabbed her M24 rifle from where it had fallen nearby, and started crawling. Every meter was agony. Morgan used her left leg to push, her arms to pull, dragging her ruined right leg behind her. The makeshift bandages left a blood trail in the snow. She tried not to think about how easy that would make her to track. The snow was falling harder now, fat flakes that stuck to her eyelashes and melted on her face. The temperature had dropped 10 degrees in the last 15 minutes. The storm was accelerating, which was both good and bad. Good because it would obscure her blood trail and ground any helicopters that might have come looking. Bad because she was already shivering, and hypothermia killed just as dead as bullets. She reached the cave entrance after 10 minutes of crawling. The opening was narrow, barely wide enough for her shoulders, but it opened into a larger space beyond. She pulled herself inside, dragging the rifle behind her. The cave was maybe 4 meters deep and 2 meters wide. Not much, but it cut the wind. More importantly, it was invisible from above. Unless someone looked during the entrance, they'd never know it was here. Morgan collapsed against the back wall, finally allowing herself to assess the damage. Her right leg was catastrophic. The wound had soaked through all her makeshift bandages. She could see bone fragments in the torn tissue. The femur was definitely fractured, probably in multiple places. Even if she survived the blood loss, even if she got rescued, the leg might never work properly again. Her ribs were cracked, but not puncturing anything vital. She could breathe without bubbling sounds, which meant her lungs were intact. The head trauma from bouncing off the cliff was harder to assess. She had a splitting headache and occasional double vision, but she was conscious and coherent. Probably a concussion. Definitely not her first. She took inventory of what she had left. The M24 rifle, still strapped across her back. 3 rounds of 7.62 millimeter ammunition in her vest pouches. The K-bar knife. A Zippo lighter her father had carried in Desert Storm. 20 feet of paracord. A half-empty water bottle. No food, no medical supplies, no radio, no way to call for help. Outside she heard voices. Morgan froze, her hand moving to the rifle. The voices were speaking Pashto, too distant to make out individual words. But they were getting closer. A patrol, searching for survivors. She pulled the rifle into position, chambered around with a quiet snick of metal. 3 bullets. She'd make them count. The voices grew louder. Through the cave entrance, she could see shadows moving through the falling snow. 4 men, maybe 5. They were moving carefully, weapons up, searching the cliff face. One of them stopped 10 meters from her cave. Morgan's finger moved to the trigger. The man was scanning the rock face with binoculars, sweeping methodically. In 5 seconds, he'd see the blood trail. In 10 seconds, he'd follow it to her hiding spot. She aimed at his center mass. Easy shot. But the sound would bring the others running, and she only had 2 bullets left after that. The math didn't work. The man lowered his binoculars, said something to his companions. They laughed. Then they moved on, continuing down the cliff face. Morgan waited until the voices faded completely before she lowered the rifle. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from blood loss. She was getting weaker. The adrenaline that had carried her this far was wearing off. She looked down at her leg. Blood was still seeping through the bandages, though slower now. She needed to stop the bleeding completely, or she'd be dead by nightfall. The K-bar knife was still in her hand, sticky with blood. She looked at it for a long moment, then at the Zippo lighter. She'd read about field cauterization in the survival manual, burning the wound to seal the blood vessels. It was medieval, agonizing, and had a high risk of infection. It was also her only option. Morgan pulled the lighter from her pocket, flicked it open. The flame caught on the first try. Her father had maintained it religiously, even 30 years after his war ended. She held the knife blade over the flame, watching the metal slowly turn red, then orange. The voices were coming back. Closer now. The patrol had reversed direction. She didn't have time to wait for the blade to heat properly. It would have to be enough. Morgan bit down on her rifle sling, pressed the hot blade against the worst of the bleeding vessels in her thigh, and discovered exactly how much pain a human body could process before shutting down. The answer was more than she thought. Morgan woke to darkness, complete, absolute darkness. For a moment, she thought she'd gone blind, until she saw the faint, gray rectangle of the cave entrance. Night had fallen. She'd passed out. Her leg throbbed with a deep, sick heat that told her the wound was infected. Already. That was fast, even for a traumatic injury. The cave floor was cold, probably 10 degrees above freezing, but she was burning up. Fever. She checked her makeshift bandages by feel. The bleeding had stopped, mostly. The cauterization had worked, in the crudest sense. She wasn't going to bleed out. She might still die from sepsis. Morgan tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. The world spun. Her head felt stuffed with cotton. She managed to prop herself against the cave wall, breathing hard from the effort. Outside, the storm was in full force. Wind howled across the mountain face. Snow blew horizontally past the cave entrance. The temperature had dropped below zero. No helicopters would fly in this. Even if someone was looking for her, even if they knew where to look, they couldn't reach her until the storm passed. The weather report had predicted clearing by morning, 16 hours from now. She had to survive 16 hours. Morgan pulled her ghillie suit tighter around her shoulders. It was designed for concealment, not warmth. Already her fingers were numb. Her toes felt like blocks of ice in her boots. Hypothermia was a real threat now. Between the blood loss and the infection and the freezing temperature, her body was losing the ability to regulate its core temperature. She needed heat. She had the Zippo, 20 feet of paracord, and a cave full of loose rocks and old deadfall. It took her 30 minutes to gather enough material for a small fire. Each trip to the cave entrance left her gasping, but she forced herself to keep moving. Movement meant heat. Heat meant survival. She built the fire near the back of the cave, where the smoke would dissipate before reaching the entrance. A tiny flame, barely larger than a candle, but it felt like the sun. She held her hands over it, felt sensations slowly return to her fingers. Then she heard the radio. At first she thought it was her imagination. Fever hallucination brought on by blood loss and infection. But no, there it was again. A burst of static, then a voice. Familiar. Anyone copy, this is Iron? Briggs. Morgan scrambled for her radio, forgetting about her leg. The pain reminded her immediately. She bit back a scream, fumbled the radio from her vest. The display was still dead, but the speaker crackled with life. The fall must have damaged the transmitter, but left the receiver intact. Confirm KIA, say again. Briggs was trying to reach her, but she couldn't transmit back. She could only listen. Valkyrie, if you can hear me, QRF is grounded until the storm passes. Command is calling it. They've classified you KIA. Killed in action. They'd given up on her. But I'm not leaving you out there. I've got your last known position. Soon as this weather breaks, I'm coming. You hear me? I'm coming. The transmission cut off. Morgan stared at the dead radio for a long moment. Then she set it aside and fed another piece of paracord to the fire. Briggs was coming. She just had to survive until he did. The fever got worse as the night progressed. Morgan drifted in and out of consciousness, her mind unable to distinguish between memory and hallucination. She saw her father, 20 years younger, teaching her to shoot at the range behind their house in Montana. "Breathe out slow," he said. "Let the shot surprise you." She saw Briggs, the first time they'd met at Fort Benning. He'd looked at her evaluation scores and grunted. "You shoot good for a female." She'd put the next 10 rounds through the same hole at 600 meters. He'd grunted again. "You shoot good, period." She saw the faces of men she'd killed through her scope. 12 confirmed. Probably more she didn't know about. They stood in a line, staring at her with empty eyes. "You're going to join us," one of them said. "Not yet," Morgan answered. The fever broke sometime near dawn. She woke to gray light filtering through the cave entrance and the sound of voices again. For a moment she thought it was another hallucination. Then she heard the words, "Blood trail leads here. Check that cave." Taliban. They'd followed her trail. Morgan reached for the M24, found it already in her hands. She didn't remember picking it up. The fever was making her lose time. She counted shadows through the cave entrance. 2 men, maybe 3, all armed. They were moving cautiously, but they'd found her blood trail. They knew she was close. She had 3 bullets. Against 3 men, the math was simple, except she couldn't miss, not even once. The first man appeared at the cave entrance, backlit by dawn. Morgan didn't hesitate. She fired. The round took him in the chest. He dropped without a sound. The second man was already moving, bringing his AK-47 up. Morgan's second shot caught him in the throat. He went down, clawing at his neck. The third man was smarter. He didn't show himself. Instead, he called out in broken English, "American! American, you are trapped! Surrender and we show mercy." Morgan didn't answer. She had 1 bullet left. "We have your friend," the voice continued. "The old one. We have him alive. You surrender, we trade." Morgan's blood went cold. Briggs. They had Briggs. "You hear me? Your friend is alive, but not for long. You surrender now or we kill him slow." Morgan's hands tightened on the rifle. It could be a lie. Probably was a lie. Standard insurgent tactics. Say anything to make your enemy surrender. But what if it wasn't? The radio crackled to life. "Don't believe them. Don't you dare." Briggs. His voice cut off abruptly, replaced by the sound of a blow and a grunt of pain. "You hear?" the Taliban fighter called. "He is here. Come out now." Morgan stared at the cave entrance, at the gray dawn light, at the blood on her hands and the last bullet in her rifle. She thought about her father, teaching her to shoot. "Some shots you take," he'd said. "Some shots you don't. Knowing the difference is what makes you a sniper instead of just a shooter." She thought about Briggs, cutting his own rope to save her. She thought about the last bullet. Morgan pulled herself to her feet, using the rifle as a crutch. Her legs screamed in protest, but she forced it to bear weight. But the other eye found hers, and in it she read a message as clear as any radio transmission. "Don't. Drop the weapon," the man with the satellite phone said. His English was good, educated, not a local fighter. Slowly. Morgan lowered the M24 to the snow. The pain in her leg was transcendent, but she kept her face neutral. Never let them see weakness. That was lesson 1. Now the knife. She pulled the K-bar from its sheath, dropped it beside the rifle. "Good, very good," the man smiled. "I am Khalid. You killed my brother yesterday, the man you shot in the compound." Morgan said nothing. Confirming kills was bad tactical doctrine. "You are the sniper, yes? The woman sniper. We have heard stories about you. Valkyrie, they call you." Khalid walked closer, studying her face. "You do not look so fearsome now. You look like you are dying." He wasn't wrong. Morgan could feel her strength draining away with each passing second. The infection in her leg was spreading fast. She probably had a few hours before sepsis shut down her organs completely. "Here is what will happen," Khalid continued. "You will tell me everything, your unit, your base, your mission protocols. In exchange, I will let your friend live. Perhaps even let you both live, if you are cooperative. She won't tell you shit, Briggs growled, and neither will I. One of the guards hit him across the face with a rifle butt. Briggs spat blood into the snow. Khalid sighed. You Americans and your honor, so predictable. He pulled a pistol from his belt, a Makarov, Soviet era. Let me be more clear. You will talk, or I will shoot your friend. Not to kill, to hurt. I will start with his knees, then his elbows, then his hands. I can make this last for hours. He pointed the pistol at Briggs's right kneecap. Wait, Morgan said. Khalid smiled. Yes? Morgan's mind raced through the tactical situation. 4 armed men. She was unarmed, injured, barely able to stand. Briggs was bound and beaten. The math was impossible. Unless... I'll talk, she said, but not here. Take us somewhere warm. I'm freezing to death out here. Khalid studied her for a long moment. Then he laughed. You want to negotiate? You have nothing to bargain with. I have information, but if I die from hypothermia before I give it to you, you have nothing. Morgan let herself sway slightly, playing up her weakness. 5 minutes in the cold and I'll be unconscious, dead in 10. It wasn't entirely an act. She was shivering violently now, her teeth chattering. Khalid considered this. Then he gestured to his men. Bring them both. There is a shepherd's hut 1 kilometer down the valley. We take them there. 2 of the guards grabbed Morgan's arms. She didn't resist as they dragged her forward. Each step sent fire through her leg, but she focused on staying conscious, on observing. The guards were careful but not professional. Local fighters, not trained soldiers. They kept their rifles slung, confident that 2 injured prisoners posed no threat. That was a mistake, but not one she could exploit yet. They passed her M24 lying in the snow. She memorized its exact position. 37 meters from the cave entrance, next to a distinctive flat rock. If she lived through this, she'd need to know where to find it. The shepherd's hut was a stone structure barely large enough for 6 people. A primitive fireplace occupied one corner, filled with cold ashes. The roof was half collapsed, letting in beams of morning light. The guards threw Morgan and Briggs against the back wall. One of them started building a fire while Khalid set up his equipment, a small digital recorder and a field laptop powered by a portable battery. Now, Khalid said, pulling up a wooden stool, let us begin. Your name and rank. Morgan said nothing. Khalid nodded to one of the guards. The man stepped forward and kicked Briggs in the ribs. The old soldier grunted, but didn't cry out. Your name and rank, Khalid repeated. Staff Sergeant Morgan Cross, she said quietly. 27th Infantry Regiment, 25th Infantry Division. Better. And your mission? Counter-sniper operations, targeting enemy leadership. Who gave you the intelligence on Commander Mahmoud? Morgan hesitated. This was where it got dangerous. If she gave them real information, she'd be betraying operational security. If she lied and they knew it, they'd start with the serious torture. Command didn't tell us the source, she said. We just got the target package. Location, description, timeline. Khalid studied her face. You are lying. Intel packages always include source designation. HUMINT, SIGINT, imagery. Which was it? Damn, he knew enough to be dangerous. SIGINT, Morgan said. Intercepted satellite phone communications. Another guard stepped forward, this time hitting her. The blow caught her across the cheek, snapping her head sideways. Stars exploded across her vision. Wrong answer, Khalid said calmly. We know there were no communications. Commander Mahmoud was using a dead phone. So again, where did the intelligence come from? Morgan spat blood onto the floor. Her mind raced. If they knew the phone was dead, they knew the mission was compromised from the start, which meant it was a setup, she said quietly. Someone fed us bad intel to get us into the kill zone. Khalid's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Confirmation. Who? Morgan pressed. Who gave you our position? That information is not for you, Khalid leaned forward. But I will tell you this. Your military has rats. Big ones. Ones that have been selling information for months. Your operation was doomed before it began. Morgan felt ice in her stomach. A mole. Someone in their chain of command was working with the Taliban. Now, Khalid continued, tell me about your base, FOB Blessing. How many soldiers? What are the defensive positions? This was the line she couldn't cross. Base security information would get people killed. She'd die before giving that up. No, she said. Khalid sighed. He pulled the Makarov from his belt, stood, and walked over to Briggs. He pressed the barrel against the old soldier's kneecap. Last chance. Morgan met Briggs's one good eye. He shook his head slightly. Don't. The sergeant is right, Khalid said. I would respect a soldier who stays silent, but I do not need your respect. I need your information. He pulled the trigger. The gunshot was deafening in the small hut. Briggs screamed, a raw, animal sound that cut through Morgan like a blade. His knee exploded in a spray of blood and shattered bone. FOB Blessing, Khalid said calmly, as if he just asked for the time. How many soldiers? Morgan's hands were shaking, not from the cold now, from rage. Fuck you. Khalid nodded. He moved the pistol to Briggs's other knee. Wait! Morgan's mind raced for anything, any scrap of information that would stop this without compromising the base. I'll tell you, just stop. I am listening. 200 personnel, company strength, defensive positions are... She's lying, Briggs shouted. Don't listen to her. She doesn't know shit about... Khalid shot him in the other knee. This time Briggs passed out from the pain. He slumped forward, unconscious, blood pooling beneath him. Morgan lunged forward without thinking, forgetting her own injuries. The guards grabbed her immediately, slammed her back against the wall. The impact drove the air from her lungs. You bastard, she gasped. You fucking bastard, he's an old man. He is a soldier. Soldiers die. This is war. Khalid checked his watch. My patience is finished. You have 1 minute to give me useful information, or I execute him. Then I work on you. Not for information anymore, just for the pleasure of it. He raised the Makarov, pointed it at Briggs's head. Morgan's mind went blank with panic. She had nothing. No leverage, no intel worth trading, no way out. In 60 seconds, Briggs would be dead. Then she would be next. The radio on one of the guards' belts crackled to life. A rapid burst of Pashto. Khalid listened, then swore in 3 languages. Get them up. We're moving. Now. What's happening? One of the guards asked. American patrol, 2 kilometers north. They're searching for survivors. Khalid grabbed his equipment, started packing. We can't stay here. Morgan's heart surged with hope. A patrol. If she could signal them somehow, make enough noise. Move the prisoners to the cave network, Khalid ordered. The deep ones, 5 kilometers south. We hold them there until the patrol passes. The guards hauled Morgan to her feet. 2 others grabbed Briggs's unconscious form, dragged him toward the door. What about his wounds? Morgan demanded. He'll bleed out. Then he bleeds out. Khalid shouldered his pack. If he lives, useful. If he dies, then we only have to move 1 prisoner. They dragged them both out into the snow. The trek to the cave network was 3 kilometers of hell. The guards forced Morgan to walk on her ruined leg, while 2 others dragged Briggs between them, leaving a trail of blood in the snow. Morgan focused on putting 1 foot in front of the other. The pain was constant now, a white-hot spike that drove up through her thigh with each step. Her makeshift bandages had soaked through, and fresh blood ran down her leg into her boot. She was going to die out here. Not from a bullet, from infection and blood loss and exposure. A slow, ugly death instead of a clean one. Behind them, she could hear Briggs moaning. Still alive at least, but both his knees were destroyed. Even if they got rescued, even if they somehow survived this, he'd never walk right again. His career was over. Because of her. Because she'd taken the shot on a compromised target. Because she'd trusted intel that should have been questioned. "Keep moving," one of the guards barked, shoving her forward. Morgan stumbled, caught herself. The world tilted. She was getting weaker. The infection was spreading. Her fever was back, making everything feel distant and unreal. They reached a rocky outcrop after 90 minutes. Khalid led them to what looked like a crack in the stone, barely 3 feet wide. But when Morgan got closer, she could see it opened into a larger passage. A cave. Not like the small shelter she'd hidden in before. This was a network, the kind the Taliban had used for decades to store weapons and avoid American airstrikes. "Inside," Khalid ordered. The guards pushed them into the darkness. The passage opened into a larger chamber, maybe 10 meters across. Old weapons crates were stacked against one wall. Empty ammunition boxes. The smell of damp stone and old gunpowder. They threw Briggs down in the center of the chamber. He didn't move, didn't make a sound. Morgan couldn't tell if he was unconscious or dead. "Tie her," Khalid said, gesturing at Morgan. The guards bound her hands behind her back with paracord, then tied her ankles together. They weren't gentle. The cord bit into her skin, cutting off circulation. Khalid pulled out his satellite phone, made a brief call in Pashto, then he turned to his men. "We wait here. The patrol will pass. Then we move them to the main compound and contact command. They'll want to interrogate them properly." "What about medical attention?" Morgan asked. "For both of us." Khalid looked at her like she'd asked for a 5-star hotel. "You are prisoners, not guests. You get what we choose to give you, which is nothing." He and 3 of the guards left, heading back down the passage. Only one man stayed behind, young, maybe 20, with nervous eyes. A new recruit, probably. Not comfortable with his assignment. Morgan filed that information away. Might be useful later. If there was a later, time became elastic. Morgan drifted in and out of consciousness, her fever spiking higher. The infection had spread throughout her leg now, creeping up toward her core. She could feel it, a hot sickness radiating through her body. She dreamed, or hallucinated. Hard to tell the difference anymore. Her father stood in the corner of the cave cleaning his rifle. "You made a mistake," he said. Not accusatory, just stating fact. "Trusted the intel without verifying. First rule of engagement, trust nothing at face value." "I know," Morgan whispered. "Knowing doesn't help if you're dead." Her sniper instructor from Fort Benning appeared next to him. "Target selection is everything. You picked the wrong mission, should have questioned the brief." "I did question it. Briggs did too. But orders are orders." "Orders are orders until they're the orders that get you killed." The instructor faded into shadow. Morgan opened her eyes, or thought she did. The cave was dark except for a shaft of light from the entrance. The guard was sitting near the passage, smoking a cigarette. Against protocol, but she was hardly in a position to criticize. Briggs was lying 3 meters away from her. She could see his chest rising and falling. Shallow breaths, but steady, still alive. "Briggs," she whispered. "Iron, can you hear me?" No response. He was unconscious, maybe in shock. Both knees destroyed, blood loss. Without medical attention, he had maybe hours, maybe less. She tested her bonds. The paracord was tight, professionally done. She couldn't feel her hands anymore. Her feet were just blocks of ice at the end of her legs. The guard glanced over at her, then looked away. Uncomfortable. "Water," Morgan said in Pashto. Basic phrase, learned during cultural briefings. "Please." The guard hesitated. "Thank you," she said in English. He nodded, retreated back to his position. A small victory. He'd shown compassion. That meant he was human, which meant he could be reasoned with. Maybe. Morgan let her head fall back against the stone. The fever was getting worse. Her thoughts were fragmenting, hard to hold together. She needed to think, to plan, but her mind kept sliding away into darkness. She heard voices, distant, echoing through the cave system. Khalid was back, talking with someone on the satellite phone. Confirmed KIA on the American roster. Both of them. Yes, I understand. How much? Morgan's Pashto was limited, but she caught enough words to understand. They were negotiating. Someone was offering money for American prisoners, or American bodies. Either way, she and Briggs had become commodities. 3 days. Yes, we can hold them that long. 3 days. That was how long they had. Then they'd be handed over to whoever was paying. Al-Qaeda maybe, or ISIS, or someone worse. Morgan had seen the videos. She knew what happened to prisoners. The ones who were lucky died quickly. The ones who weren't lucky ended up on the internet. She pulled at her bonds again, ignoring the pain. The paracord had stretched slightly. Her hands were so cold they'd shrunk, and the swelling in her fingers had gone down. Not much, but maybe enough. She twisted her wrists, working them back and forth. The cord cut into her skin, but she kept going. Blood helped, made things slippery. Her right hand shifted. Just a millimeter, but it was movement. She kept working. The young guard fell asleep around midnight. Morgan heard his breathing change, become deeper and more regular. She waited 10 minutes to be sure, then resumed working on her bonds. The paracord had stretched enough now that she could rotate her wrists. Not free yet, but close. She pulled harder, ignoring the pain as the cord cut deeper into her flesh. Her right hand came free. Morgan froze, listening. The guard hadn't moved. She could hear voices deeper in the cave, Khalid and the other fighters, probably sleeping in shifts. She reached down, worked on the bonds around her ankles. These were easier. Whoever tied them had done a sloppy job, and her boots had provided enough bulk that the cord was loose. 2 minutes later, she was free. She lay still, assessing her condition. The fever was bad. She was shaking so hard she could barely control her limbs. Her leg was a disaster. The infection had spread up past her knee now, red streaks of sepsis crawling toward her core. She had maybe 12 hours before the infection killed her. Probably less. But she was free, and she had a choice to make. She could try to escape, crawl out of the cave, find the American patrol that had been searching earlier. But that meant leaving Briggs behind. With his injuries, there was no way to move him quietly. He'd slow her down, and they'd both die. Or she could try to take out the guard, grab a weapon, and fight her way out. Terrible odds, but at least she'd be doing something. Or... The guard's radio crackled. Morgan's head snapped toward it. The guard stirred, but didn't wake. The radio crackled again, then a voice came through, speaking English. Any station, this is Eagle 6, conducting search and rescue operations. Any American personnel, respond. An American unit, still searching, still out there. The radio was clipped to the guard's belt, 3 meters away. If she could get to it without waking him, she could call for help. Morgan started crawling. Every movement was agony. Her legs screamed. Her ribs ground together. But she moved, inch by inch, closing the distance. 2 meters. 1 meter. The guard shifted in his sleep, muttered something in Pashto. Morgan froze. He settled back into sleep. She reached out, fingers closing around the radio. Slowly, carefully, she unclipped it from his belt. The guard's eyes opened. For a heartbeat, they stared at each other. Then he opened his mouth to shout. Morgan's training took over. She lunged forward, driving her thumb into his throat. The shout turned into a choked gurgle. He grabbed for his rifle, but she was already moving, using her weight to pin him down. Something cracked. Morgan curled up, tried to protect her core, but he kicked her again, and again. You killed Rashid, Khalid snarled. My brother's son, his only son. I was going to make your death quick, but now... He pulled his pistol, aimed it at her head. The cave entrance exploded. The flashbang grenade turned the world white. Morgan couldn't see, couldn't hear, could only feel the concussive force that picked her up and slammed her against the cave wall. Then the shooting started. Automatic weapons fire echoed through the cave. Muzzle flashes strobed in the darkness. Men were shouting in English, American voices, American weapons. The cavalry had arrived. Morgan tried to move, to identify herself as friendly, but her body wouldn't respond. The beating from Khalid had broken something important. She could taste blood in her mouth. Lots of it. Clear left. 2 combatants down. Check those bodies. Look for Americans. A flashlight beam hit her face. She tried to speak, managed only a wet cough. Got one. Female. American uniform. The voice was young, frantic. Medic. Need a medic here. Hands on her, rolling her over. Someone checking her pulse. The radio chatter continued, clearing the cave, securing the perimeter, calling for Kazovac. Where's Briggs? Morgan managed to whisper. Master Sergeant Briggs. Got another one, someone shouted from deeper in the cave. Male, critical condition, both legs shot to shit. Get that medevac spun up. 2 urgent surgical heavy bleeding. Morgan felt herself being lifted onto a stretcher. The movement sent fresh pain through her body. Everything was spinning, breaking apart into fragments. She saw Khalid's body lying 3 meters away. Half his head was gone. She saw American soldiers, young faces, too young, running through the cave with rifles up. She saw the morning sun through the cave entrance, bright and impossibly beautiful. Then she saw nothing at all. Morgan woke to white walls and the steady beep of a heart monitor. For a moment she thought she was dead, that this was some kind of afterlife waiting room. Then the pain kicked in and she knew she was definitely still alive. A nurse appeared in her field of vision. Easy, Sergeant. You're in Landstuhl, Germany. You've been out for 3 days. Germany. That meant she'd been medevaced all the way from Afghanistan. That meant her injuries were serious enough to warrant continental care. Briggs, Morgan croaked. Her throat was raw, like she'd been screaming. Master Sergeant Briggs, is he? Alive, the nurse said. He's in ICU. Lost both legs below the knee, but he's stable. Both legs. Jesus Christ. The infection in your leg was severe, the nurse continued. You were septic when they brought you in. We had to do extensive debridement. You'll need multiple surgeries, probably a year of physical therapy, but you'll walk again. Morgan closed her eyes. Walking again seemed like the least of her problems. There are some people who want to talk to you, the nurse said. Military investigators. They've been waiting for you to wake up. Send them in. 2 men in Army CID uniforms entered. They looked tired, professional, and deeply unhappy. Staff Sergeant Cross, the older one said. I'm Agent Morrison. This is Agent Delacroix. We need to ask you some questions about the mission in the Korengal Valley. The mission was compromised, Morgan said. Someone leaked our position. We know. We've been investigating the intelligence breach for the past 72 hours. Morrison pulled out a tablet, showed her a photograph. Do you recognize this man? Morgan looked at the photo. A middle-aged man in Army uniform, major's rank. She didn't recognize him. His name is Major Curtis Wade, Morrison continued. He was the intelligence officer who provided the target package for your mission. He's also been selling information to the Taliban for 18 months. Morgan felt something cold settle in her stomach. How much? We're still determining the extent of the damage, but at least 7 operations were compromised. Yours was the first one where we had a survivor who could confirm the leak. 7 operations. How many soldiers had died because of Wade's betrayal? How many missions had failed? Where is he now? Morgan asked quietly. In custody at Fort Leavenworth. He'll be facing court-martial within the month. Multiple counts of treason, conspiracy, and getting American personnel killed. Morrison paused. Your testimony will be crucial to the prosecution. You'll have it. There's something else. Delacroix spoke for the first time. The Taliban fighter who interrogated you, Khalid Mahmoud. We've identified him through biometric data. He was a high-value target, brother of the man you killed in the original strike. Command is putting you in for a Bronze Star. Morgan laughed. It hurt. A medal for getting ambushed and tortured. That's rich. A medal for surviving behind enemy lines for 36 hours with critical injuries, evading capture, and providing intelligence that led to the arrest of a traitor. Morrison's voice was hard. You did your job, Sergeant, under conditions that would have killed most soldiers. Briggs did his job. I just didn't die. Master Sergeant Briggs is getting a Silver Star, Delacroix said, and a medical retirement with full benefits. He specifically requested that we tell you that. Morgan closed her eyes. Retirement. The old man's career was over. 32 years of service ended by a bullet in a cave in Afghanistan. Get some rest, Sergeant, Morrison said. We'll need formal statements in a few days, but for now, you're done. They left. Morgan lay in the hospital bed, staring at the white ceiling, listening to the heart monitor beep. She was alive. Briggs was alive. They'd stopped a traitor and eliminated a high-value target. Mission accomplished. So why did she feel like she'd lost? 2 weeks later, Morgan was strong enough to use a wheelchair. The nurses wheeled her down to the ICU to see Briggs. He looked like hell. 60 pounds lighter, tubes running in and out of him, both legs ending in bandages at the knee. But his eyes were clear when they found hers. Hey, Valkyrie. Hey, Iron. They sat in silence for a moment. What do you say to someone who sacrificed everything to save you? I saw the paperwork, Briggs said finally. Medical retirement, full pension, VA benefits. They're even talking about a prosthetics program at Walter Reed. That's good. It's bullshit. His voice was rough. I'm 58 years old. I've been a soldier since I was 18, and now I'm done. Because some desk-writing piece of shit sold us out for 30 pieces of silver. $40,000, Morgan said quietly. That's what Wade was getting paid. $40,000 per intelligence package. Briggs laughed bitterly. My legs cost 40 grand. That's good to know. Really puts things in perspective. I'm sorry. Don't. Briggs's voice was sharp. Don't you dare apologize. You didn't shoot me. You didn't betray us. You did your job and you survived. That's all any soldier can do. I should have questioned the intel, should have pushed back harder on the mission brief. We both should have, but we didn't, because we're soldiers and soldiers follow orders. That's the deal. He shifted in the bed, winced. You know what the worst part is? I'd do it again. Cutting that rope, taking those bullets, all of it, because that's what brothers in arms do. Morgan felt tears on her face. She didn't try to stop them. How's the leg? Briggs asked. 17 surgeries scheduled, maybe more. They think I'll regain about 70% function. Enough to stay in the Army? Morgan shook her head. Medical board meets next month. They're recommending discharge. So we're both done? Yeah, we're both done. They sat in silence, two soldiers at the end of their war. Outside the window, German rain fell on German soil. 10,000 miles from the mountains of Afghanistan. 10,000 miles from the blood and the snow and the cave where they'd both left pieces of themselves. What will you do? Morgan asked. Briggs stared at the ceiling. I don't know. I've been a soldier my entire adult life. I don't know how to be anything else. Me neither. I guess we'll figure it out. He looked at her. Together, maybe. Two broken soldiers trying to remember how to be human. I'd like that. The nurse came in, said visiting hours were over. Morgan let herself be wheeled back to her room. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the future. No more mountains, no more sniper rifles, no more missions. Just her and Briggs and the long road of recovery ahead. Some prices you pay in iron. Some prices you pay in blood, and some prices you pay for the rest of your life. Morgan was released from Landstuhl 3 weeks later. She was transferred to Walter Reed in Washington, D.C., where she'd continue her rehabilitation and prepare for her medical board hearing. The day before she left Germany, Agent Morrison came back to see her. "I thought you might want to know," he said. "Major Wade's court-martial concluded yesterday. Verdict? Guilty on all counts. Life in prison at Leavenworth. No possibility of parole." Morrison sat down in the visitor's chair. "But there's more." During his testimony, he revealed details about the intelligence operation that we hadn't uncovered. "What details?" "He wasn't working alone. There's a network. Officers in multiple branches, selling information to the highest bidder. Wade was just one node." Morrison pulled out a folder. "The investigation is ongoing, but preliminary evidence suggests at least a dozen compromised operations over the past 2 years. Morgan felt sick. "How many casualties?" "We're still calculating, but probably triple digits, dead and wounded." "Jesus Christ." "The good news is that your mission broke the case open. Wade panicked when you survived, started destroying evidence, reaching out to his contacts, made mistakes. If you died in that valley, we might never have found him." Small comfort. Hundreds of soldiers dead because traitors in their own ranks had sold them out. "There's something else," Morrison continued. "During the raid on the cave, we recovered Khalid Mahmoud's satellite phone. The NSA has been analyzing his communications. You're not going to believe who he was talking to." "Who?" Morrison showed her a transcription. Morgan read it once, twice. Her hands started shaking. "That's impossible." "We've verified it. The encryption matches. The voice pattern matches. It's real." The conversation was between Khalid and an American number. Not just any American, a congressman, a member of the House Armed Services Committee, someone with access to classified military operations. "We're building a case," Morrison said, "but it's going to be complicated. Political implications, classified evidence. It'll take months, maybe years." "But you'll get him?" "We'll get all of them. Every traitor who put American lives at risk for money." Morrison stood. "Your testimony is going to be crucial, not just for Wade's court-martial, for everything that comes after." "I'll testify." "I know you will. That's why you're getting reassigned when you leave Walter Reed." "Reassigned? I'm being discharged." "Change of plans. Someone high up decided you're too valuable to lose." Morrison handed her a sealed envelope. "Orders. You're going to CID when you're medically cleared. They want you on the investigative team." Morgan stared at the envelope. "I'm a sniper, not an investigator." "You're a soldier who survived a compromised mission and brought down a traitor. That makes you exactly what we need." Morrison moved toward the door, then paused. "The Army is broken, Sergeant. Has been for a long time. People like Wade, people in positions of trust who betray that trust. They're destroying us from the inside. We need good soldiers to help clean house." He left. Morgan opened the envelope, read the orders. They were real. Temporary assignment to CID, pending medical clearance. A second chance. A new mission. She thought about her father, about what he'd say if he were still alive. Probably something about duty and honor and never walking away from a fight. She thought about Briggs, lying in ICU with no legs and a silver star he'd never wanted. She thought about the 100+ soldiers who died because someone had sold them out. Then she picked up her phone and called the number at the bottom of the orders. "This is Staff Sergeant Morgan Cross," she said when someone answered. "I'm accepting the assignment." 6 months later, Morgan stood in a courtroom in Virginia, her right leg still weak but functional after 17 surgeries. She wore her dress uniform, ribbons on her chest telling the story of her service. Bronze Star, Purple Heart, Combat Action Badge. The medals felt heavy, like they weighed more than they should. In the defendant's chair sat Congressman Richard Holbrook, 63 years old, 20-year veteran of the House Armed Services Committee, salt and pepper hair, expensive suit, the kind of man who looked trustworthy on television, the kind of man who'd sold classified military operations to the Taliban for $300,000. The prosecutor finished his opening statement. Then it was Morgan's turn to testify. She walked to the witness stand, raised her right hand, swore to tell the truth. Staff Sergeant Cross, the prosecutor began, can you describe the events of February 15th of this year? Morgan began to talk about the mission, the ambush, the cave, the torture, the satellite phone intercepts that had connected Khalid to Holbrook. The courtroom was silent. Jurors leaned forward. Even the judge seemed transfixed. She talked for 3 hours. When she finished, the prosecutor thanked her. The defense attorney tried to cross-examine her, to poke holes in her testimony, but there were no holes, just facts. Cold, hard, undeniable facts. The trial lasted 4 days. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Morgan watched as they led Holbrook away in handcuffs. He didn't look at her, couldn't meet her eyes. Outside the courthouse, Agent Morrison was waiting. Good work in there. Just telling the truth. The truth is powerful. Morrison handed her a file folder. This is your next assignment. Army contract officer in Germany. Suspected of selling weapons to insurgent groups in Syria. We need someone to go undercover, gather evidence. Morgan opened the folder, scanned the briefing. It was everything she hated about her new job. Paperwork, bureaucracy, playing politics instead of being a soldier. It was also necessary. Someone had to do it. When do I leave? 2 weeks. That enough time to get your affairs in order? Morgan thought about her apartment in D.C., her physical therapy appointments, her meetings with the VA psychologist who was helping her process the trauma. It'll have to be. Morrison nodded. One more thing. Master Sergeant Briggs called. He's out of the hospital. Wanted to know if you'd be interested in getting coffee before you deploy. Tell him yes. They met at a cafe in Georgetown 2 days later. Briggs showed up on prosthetic legs, walking with a cane but walking. He'd lost weight, got some color back in his face. Almost looked like his old self. Looking good, Iron. Lying suits you, Valkyrie. He sat down carefully, set the cane aside. How's the new job? Bureaucratic, frustrating, important. In other words, terrible. Pretty much. You? Teaching at Quantico, training new snipers. Turns out you don't need legs to teach people how to shoot. He sipped his coffee. It's not the same, but it's something. They sat in comfortable silence. 2 warriors out of the war, but not out of the fight. I got a letter from Wade, Morgan said finally, from Leavenworth. What'd it say? That he was sorry, that the money was for his daughter's medical bills, that he never meant for anyone to get hurt. Bullshit. Probably, but I wrote him back anyway. Told him I hoped his daughter got better. That betrayal has a cost, and he'd be paying it for the rest of his life. Briggs studied her. You forgive him? No, but I understand him. People make choices. Some choices cost them everything. Some choices cost other people everything. She met his eyes. We all pay the iron price eventually. Some of us pay more than others. Yeah, some of us pay more. They finished their coffee, made plans to meet again when Morgan got back from Germany, promised to stay in touch. Outside, the D.C. afternoon was bright and clear. Morgan walked to the metro station, her leg aching but holding. She thought about the next mission, the contract officer in Germany, the evidence they needed to gather. She thought about all the other corrupt officers out there, all the other traitors wearing American uniforms, selling out their brothers and sisters for money. It was a different kind of war now. No sniper rifles, no mountains, no clean shots at enemy combatants. Just investigations and evidence in courtrooms. But it was still war, and she was still a soldier. Some wars you fight with bullets. Some wars you fight with truth. Morgan descended into the metro station and headed home. The iron price was paid. But the mission continued. It always would. The shooting range at Quantico was empty, except for 2 people. Morgan lined up her shot, controlled her breathing, and squeezed the trigger. The round punched through the target's center mass at 800 meters. "Still got it," Briggs said from his wheelchair beside the shooting bench. He'd given up on the prosthetics 6 months ago. Too much pain, not enough mobility. The wheelchair was faster anyway. "Muscle memory," Morgan replied, cycling the bolt. "Body remembers even when the mind doesn't want to." She fired again. Another center mass hit. 3 years since the Korengal Valley. 3 years since the cave. Her leg had healed as well as it was going to. 72% function, just like the doctors predicted. She could run, could shoot, could do everything a soldier needed to do. Except forget. "You hear about the Holbrook appeal?" Briggs asked. "Denied. Third Circuit upheld the conviction." Morgan set the rifle down, began breaking it down for cleaning. "He'll die in prison." "Good." "Is it?" Morgan pulled a cleaning rod through the barrel. "Sometimes I wonder if we actually fixed anything. Wade's in prison. Holbrook's in prison. But there are a dozen more just like them that we haven't caught yet. That's why you're still hunting." Morgan had spent the last 3 years with CID, investigating corruption cases across the military. She'd helped prosecute 11 officers, from lieutenants to colonels. Every case felt like pulling teeth, gathering evidence, building cases, fighting lawyers and politics. But every conviction felt like justice for the soldiers who died because someone had betrayed them. "Got a new case yesterday," Morgan said. "Colonel at Fort Bragg, suspected of falsifying readiness reports, taking kickbacks from contractors. Small potatoes compared to Wade, but it matters." "Yeah, it matters." Her phone buzzed. A text from Agent Morrison. "Need to see you. Urgent. My office, 1400. Morgan showed Briggs the message. "Sounds serious," he said. Everything's serious with Morrison. But she felt a familiar tightness in her chest. The same feeling she'd had 3 years ago when Morrison had first told her about the intelligence network. When he'd shown her how deep the corruption went. She finished cleaning the rifle, packed it away. "Want to come with?" "Wouldn't miss it." They drove to the CID headquarters in silence. Briggs didn't ask what she thought the meeting was about. He knew her well enough by now to recognize when she was processing, thinking through scenarios. Morrison's office was exactly as bureaucratic as expected. Gray walls, government-issue furniture, stacks of case files on every surface. He looked up when they entered, and Morgan saw something in his face that made her stomach drop. Fear. Morrison didn't get scared easily. "Sit down," he said, "both of you." They sat. Morrison pulled out a tablet, turned it to face them. On the screen was a photograph of a man in his 40s. Civilian clothes, unremarkable face. "His name is David Chen," Morrison said. "Former Army intelligence officer, retired 8 years ago. Now he works as a defense contractor, consulting for the Pentagon on Middle East operations." "Okay," Morgan said slowly. "What about him?" 2 days ago, we received intelligence from NSA. Chen has been in contact with known terrorist facilitators in Pakistan. The intercepts suggest he's selling classified information about ongoing operations." Morgan felt ice in her veins. Another one. Worse than Wade, worse than Holbrook. Morrison swiped to another photo. This one showing Chen meeting with a Middle Eastern man in what looked like a cafe. Chen has access to real-time operational data, troop movements, mission parameters, target packages, everything. "Jesus Christ," Briggs muttered. "How many operations has he compromised?" Morgan asked. Morrison hesitated. "We don't know. Could be dozens. Could be hundreds. He's had access for 8 years." The number was staggering. 8 years of betrayal. How many soldiers had died? How many missions had failed? "We need to stop him," Morgan said. "Now, arrest him, charge him." "We can't." Morrison's voice was flat. Chen is protected. He has friends in the Pentagon, in Congress. If we move on him without ironclad evidence, he'll lawyer up and disappear. We get one shot at this. So what do you need? Morrison looked at her for a long moment. We need someone to get close to him. Someone who can gather evidence. Someone he won't suspect. Morgan understood immediately. You want me to go undercover? Chen is speaking at a defense industry conference in Dubai next week. High-level contractors, military liaisons, intelligence officers. It's the perfect opportunity to make contact. And then what? I just ask him if he's a traitor? You get hired by his consulting firm, work for him, gain his trust, find evidence of his contacts with terrorist facilitators. Morrison pulled up a dossier on the tablet. We've built you a cover identity. Sarah Mitchell, former Army intelligence analyst, now freelancing in the private sector. Your background will check out. We've seeded the databases with everything Chen would look for. Morgan stared at the dossier. A new name, a new life, a new mission. How long? She asked. Could be weeks, could be months. However long it takes to get what we need. And if he figures out who I am? Morrison didn't answer. He didn't need to. They both knew what happened to people who crossed terrorist networks. Briggs leaned forward. She's not doing this alone. I'm going with her. No offense, Master Sergeant, but you're in a wheelchair. You'd be noticed. Then I'll be her handler, remote support. Someone she can report to, someone who knows her well enough to tell when something's wrong. Briggs's voice was hard. She doesn't go into this without backup. Morrison considered this, then nodded. Okay, you'll be her CID contact. But this stays compartmented. No one else knows about the operation except the three of us and the director. Agreed, Morgan said. When do I leave? 72 hours. That gives you enough time to study the cover identity and prepare. Morgan stood. Her leg ached. It always did when stress kicked in, but she ignored it. I'll be ready. The conference center in Dubai was a monument to wealth and excess. Glass towers, marble floors, men in expensive suits discussing billion-dollar contracts. Morgan felt out of place in her business attire, but she forced herself to project confidence. Sarah Mitchell, intelligence analyst, looking for work. Chen was easy to spot. He stood at the center of a crowd, holding court, discussing counter-terrorism strategy with the kind of casual authority that came from years of experience. He looked exactly like his photograph. Unremarkable face, but his eyes were sharp, calculating, missing nothing. Morgan waited for an opening. When Chen stepped away from the crowd to get a drink, she made her move. Mr. Chen? Sarah Mitchell. I heard your presentation this morning on predictive intelligence modeling. Brilliant work. Chen turned, sized her up in 3 seconds. Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. Are you with one of the contractors? Freelance, former Army intelligence, looking for opportunities in the private sector. Army intelligence. Chen's interest sharpened. What unit? Morgan rattled off her cover story. Assignments, deployments, qualifications. All of it verified in the databases. All of it designed to appeal to someone like Chen. Impressive resume, Chen said when she finished. What brings you to Dubai? Same reason as everyone else. Looking for work. The Army doesn't pay enough to make a career of it. Chen smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. I know that feeling. I spent 15 years in uniform before I realized I could make 10 times as much in the private sector. He handed her a business card. Send me your CV. I'm always looking for talented analysts. I will, thank you. Morgan walked away, feeling Chen's eyes on her back. First contact made. Now she just had to wait. Her phone buzzed 2 hours later. A text from an unknown number. Dinner tonight? 8 p.m. Address attached. DC. She texted back confirmation, then called Briggs on the encrypted line. He bit, she said, meeting him for dinner. Good. Remember, you're Sarah Mitchell. You want the job. You're ambitious, slightly disillusioned with government work. You're exactly what he's looking for. I know. And Morgan, be careful. This guy has killed people. Don't underestimate him. I won't. The restaurant was high-end, overlooking Dubai Marina. Chen was already there, sitting at a corner table with perfect sight lines to the entrance. Military training, Morgan noted. He'd chosen the defensible position. Ms. Mitchell, please, sit, they ordered. Made small talk. Chen was charming, engaging, asking all the right questions about her background. Morgan played her role perfectly, eager but not desperate, confident but not arrogant. I reviewed your CV, Chen said over the appetizer. Very impressive. Multiple deployments, high-level clearances. You've worked on some sensitive operations. I've done my share. Tell me about Afghanistan. You were there during the surge? Morgan recited her cover story. She'd memorized every detail, every deployment, every operation. Chen listened carefully, occasionally asking pointed questions designed to catch inconsistencies. She didn't give him any. You're exactly the kind of analyst I need, Chen said finally. I have a project starting next month. Strategic assessment for a client in the Gulf. 3-month contract, excellent pay. Interested? Very. What's the client? A regional government. They're concerned about Iranian influence in their territory. They need someone who understands U.S. intelligence capabilities, who can help them assess threats. It sounded legitimate, probably was legitimate. Chen would be careful to mix real work with his treasonous activities. The question was how to get close enough to find the treason. I'm interested, Morgan said. When do I start? First, I need to verify your background. Standard procedure. I'll need access to your clearance records, employment history, references. This was the test. If her cover wasn't perfect, Chen would spot it immediately. Of course, I'll send everything over tomorrow. Chen smiled. Excellent. Welcome to the team, Ms. Mitchell. They finished dinner. Chen paid. Expensive wine, $300 steaks, the kind of meal that said, I have money to burn. Outside, he offered her a ride back to her hotel. Thank you, but I'll take a taxi. Professional boundaries and all that. Smart. I appreciate caution. He shook her hand. I'll be in touch once your background check clears. Morgan watched him drive away in a black Mercedes. Then she called Briggs. I'm in. He's running a background check. If the cover holds, I start next month. It'll hold. We built it too well to fail. Let's hope you're right. The background check cleared. Morgan received an email 2 weeks later with a contract, an advance payment of $50,000, and instructions to report to Chen's office in Abu Dhabi. The office was in a high-rise overlooking the Persian Gulf. Expensive furniture, state-of-the-art equipment, a staff of 6 analysts working on various projects. Chen gave her the tour personally, introducing her to the team. Sarah will be heading up the Iranian threat assessment, he announced. She's former Army intelligence, extensive experience in the region. I expect everyone to give her full cooperation. The team welcomed her. They seemed legitimate, smart people doing legitimate work. No red flags. No indication that their boss was selling secrets to terrorists. Chen showed her to her office, a corner workspace with a view of the water. Get settled, we'll have a project briefing at 1400. Morgan spent the morning setting up her workspace and reviewing project files. Everything looked professional, legitimate. If she didn't know better, she'd think Chen was exactly what he appeared to be, a successful defense contractor doing valuable work. But she did know better. The briefing that afternoon was comprehensive. Chen laid out the client's concerns: Iranian-backed militias operating in the region, weapons smuggling, intelligence gathering. He assigned tasks to each team member, including Morgan. Sarah, I want you to focus on Iranian intelligence capabilities. What assets do they have in the Gulf? How are they gathering information? What are their blind spots? I'll need access to classified databases, Morgan said. Current intelligence on Iranian operations. Already arranged. You'll have the same clearance levels you had in the Army. Chen smiled. Perks of working with someone who has Pentagon connections. That was the first red flag. Contractors didn't usually have access to current classified intelligence. Chen's Pentagon connections were deeper than they should be. Morgan spent the next week building her analysis, digging through classified files, assembling a picture of Iranian operations in the Gulf. It was real work, valuable intelligence that would actually help the client. But she was also looking for something else. Evidence of Chen's contacts with terrorist facilitators. Proof that he was selling information. She found nothing. Chen was too careful. He kept his treasonous activities completely separate from his legitimate business. No suspicious emails, no unusual contacts, no evidence at all. Morgan called Briggs on the encrypted line after 2 weeks. "I've got nothing. Everything here looks clean. Keep looking. The NSA intercepts were real. He's dirty. You just have to find the proof." "What if I can't? What if he's too good at compartmentalizing?" "Then we find another way, but don't give up yet." Morgan didn't give up. She worked late nights, studied Chen's patterns, looked for any crack in his operational security. She found it 3 weeks into the assignment. Chen made a mistake. A small one, barely noticeable. But Morgan had been a sniper. She was trained to notice the smallest details. He'd left his office door open during a phone call, just for 30 seconds while his assistant brought him coffee. Morgan had walked past at exactly the right moment to hear 3 words spoken in Arabic. "Package delivered, Tuesday." Chen didn't speak Arabic in the office. He spoke English exclusively, even with Middle Eastern clients. The fact that he'd switched languages meant the call was personal, private, something he didn't want his staff to overhear. Morgan went back to her office, pulled up Chen's calendar. Tuesday was 3 days away. No meeting scheduled, no travel plans. She called Briggs. "I think he's making a drop. Tuesday, unknown location. Can you follow him?" "If I'm careful." Tuesday arrived. Morgan told the office she was feeling ill, left early. She set up surveillance on Chen's apartment from a cafe across the street. Chen left at 1800, driving his Mercedes. Morgan followed in a rental car, staying 3 vehicles back, using every counter-surveillance technique she'd learned. Chen drove for 90 minutes, heading into the desert outside Abu Dhabi. The traffic thinned out. Morgan had to drop back further to avoid detection. Chen pulled off the highway onto a dirt road. Morgan drove past, found a side road half a kilometer ahead, doubled back on foot. She reached a low ridge overlooking Chen's position just as he was meeting with another man. Middle Eastern, 40s, dressed in local clothing. They talked for 5 minutes. Chen handed over a briefcase. The other man opened it, examined the contents, nodded. They shook hands. Then they separated, driving in opposite directions. Morgan photographed the entire exchange with a telephoto lens. Got the other man's license plate, got clear shots of both faces. She called Briggs as soon as she was clear. "I've got him. Photographed a handoff in the desert. Sending you the images now." "Outstanding. I'll run the plates, see who Chen was meeting." The answer came back 6 hours later. The man's name was Jamal Qasim, Saudi national, known associate of Al-Qaeda facilitators, on 3 different terrorist watch lists. They had Chen. Morrison flew to Abu Dhabi the next day. They met in Morgan's hotel room, her, Briggs via video link, and Morrison with a team of FBI agents. "The photographs are solid," Morrison said. "Combined with the NSA intercepts, we have enough for an arrest warrant. We move tomorrow." "What about the briefcase?" Morgan asked. "What was Chen giving him?" "We don't know yet. Could be intelligence, could be weapons specs, could be operational plans." Morrison pulled up a map on his tablet. "We're coordinating with UAE authorities. They'll arrest Qasim tonight, search his property. Whatever was in that briefcase, we'll find it." "And Chen?" "FBI will take him at his office tomorrow morning. You'll be there when it happens. We'll need you to identify him, confirm the photographs. Morgan nodded. 3 months of undercover work was about to pay off. But something felt wrong. What is it? Briggs asked through the video link. He could read her too well. I don't know. This feels too easy. Chen has been doing this for 8 years. He's smart, careful. Why would he suddenly make a mistake? Everyone makes mistakes eventually, Morrison said. But why now? Why when I'm watching? Morgan stood, paced the hotel room. What if he knows? What if the whole thing was a test? Your cover is solid. There's no way he could know your CID. Unless someone told him. The room went silent. You think there's another leak? Briggs said quietly. Wade wasn't working alone. Holbrook wasn't working alone. What if there's someone else? Someone higher up who warned Chen that CID was investigating him? Morrison's face went hard. If that's true, then Chen knows we're coming, which means we're walking into a trap. Morrison grabbed his phone, started making calls. I'm pulling the arrest team. We need to... The window exploded. Morgan hit the floor as gunfire tore through the hotel room. Morrison went down, blood spraying from his shoulder. The FBI agents returned fire through the shattered window. Get down! One of the agents shouted, pulling Morrison behind the bed. Morgan crawled to her bag, pulled out the Glock she'd hidden there. Standard CID issue. She'd hoped she wouldn't need it. Hope was dead now. More gunfire. The door to the hotel room splintered. Men in tactical gear poured through. Not police, not military, private contractors, mercenaries, Chen's cleanup crew. Morgan fired twice, dropped the first man through the door. The second one returned fire, rounds chewing up the wall behind her. The FBI agents were pinned down, outgunned. Morrison was bleeding badly, trying to use his phone with shaking hands. Morgan's training took over. She evaluated the tactical situation in 2 seconds. 6 hostiles, maybe more in the hallway. She and the FBI agents were trapped with limited ammunition and no backup. They were going to die here. Unless... Morgan grabbed a flashbang grenade from one of the fallen contractors, pulled the pin, and threw it into the hallway. The explosion bought them 3 seconds. Out the window, she shouted. Fire escape! They didn't have a fire escape, but the building next door was only 3 meters away, close enough. Morgan grabbed Morrison, dragged him toward the window. One of the FBI agents provided covering fire while the other helped her. They reached the window just as more contractors poured through the door. Jump! Morgan pushed Morrison out the window. He fell, hit the adjacent building's roof hard, but he was alive. The FBI agents followed. Then Morgan. She jumped, felt her bad leg buckle when she landed. Pain shot through her thigh, the old injury screaming. But she forced herself up, limping toward the roof access door. Behind them, the contractors were already following. They made it to the stairwell, descended 8 floors at a dead run. Morgan's leg was on fire, barely supporting her weight, but she kept moving. They burst out of the building into an alley. Morrison was pale, going into shock from blood loss. One of the FBI agents was calling for backup, shouting into his radio. Chen knew, Morgan gasped. He knew we were coming. Someone warned him. We need to get you somewhere safe, the FBI agent said. Safe doesn't exist anymore. Morgan checked her pistol, half a magazine left. Chen won't stop until we're all dead. He can't leave witnesses. Her phone rang. Unknown number, she answered. Ms. Mitchell, or should I say, Staff Sergeant Cross? Chen's voice was calm, almost friendly. Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out? I've been in intelligence for 23 years. I know all the CID playbooks. How long have you known? Since the moment we met in Dubai. Your cover was good, but not perfect. Small inconsistencies in your deployment history. References that were a little too clean. He paused. I've been watching you, testing you, seeing how far CID had gotten in their investigation. You set up the desert meeting. You wanted me to photograph it. Exactly, and you took the bait perfectly. Now I know what evidence you have, what you've reported back to your handlers, which means I know exactly what I need to clean up. You'll never get away with this. I already have. By tomorrow, you and everyone who knows about me will be dead, and I'll disappear. New identity, new life. I've been preparing for this contingency for years. We have proof, the photographs, the NSA intercepts, evidence that will disappear along with you. My friends in the Pentagon are very thorough. Chen's voice hardened. You should have stayed away, Sergeant. You survived the Korengal Valley. You should have taken that gift and lived a quiet life. But you just had to keep hunting traitors. Someone has to. And look where it got you. Bleeding in an alley in Abu Dhabi, about to die 10,000 miles from home. He hung up. Morgan stared at the phone. Then she looked at Morrison, at the FBI agents, at Briggs on her phone screen. He's coming, she said quietly, and he's bringing everything he has. They fortified an abandoned warehouse 3 blocks away. Not ideal, but it was defensible. One entrance, good sight lines, thick walls. Morgan and the FBI agents set up defensive positions while Morrison tried to stop his bleeding with a trauma kit. Backup is 20 minutes out, one of the agents said. We just have to hold until then. 20 minutes. It might as well be 20 hours. Morgan checked her ammunition. 12 rounds left. She looked at the FBI agents. They had maybe 60 rounds between them. Against Chen's mercenaries, that wasn't enough. Briggs, she said to her phone, you still there? I'm here. His face on the screen was grim. I'm pulling up satellite feeds of your location, trying to get you some intelligence. We need more than intelligence. We need a miracle. You've survived worse. Barely. Outside, vehicle engines rumbled, multiple vehicles moving into position around the warehouse. Chen had arrived. Contact front, one of the FBI agents shouted. The warehouse door exploded inward. Mercenaries poured through, firing fully automatic weapons. Morgan returned fire, dropped 2 of them. The FBI agents laid down suppressing fire, but more kept coming. Morgan fell back to a secondary position. Her leg was screaming, barely holding her weight. She fired, reloaded, fired again. Each shot counted. Each round had to matter. A mercenary flanked left. Morgan shot him through the neck. Another came from the right. The FBI agent dropped him, but they were being overrun. We can't hold them, Morrison shouted, clutching his shoulder wound. Morgan's pistol clicked empty. She dropped the magazine, slammed in her last one. 7 rounds. That was all she had left. 7 rounds against 24 mercenaries. The math was impossible. Then she heard it. A sound she'd never thought she'd be happy to hear. Helicopter rotors. That's not backup, one of the FBI agents shouted. They're 30 minutes out still. Morgan looked at Briggs on her phone screen. He was smiling. What did you do? She asked. Called in a favor. You remember that Saudi colonel you helped prosecute last year? The one whose brother is in their military? Yeah. He owed us. I collected. Through the warehouse roof, Morgan saw 2 Apache helicopters descending. Saudi Air Force. Their chain guns opened up, tearing through the mercenaries' vehicles. The firefight outside stopped immediately. The mercenaries who weren't dead scattered, running for cover. This is Saudi Air Force, a voice boomed over the helicopter's loudspeaker in Arabic and English. Cease fire. Lay down your weapons. You are surrounded. The shooting stopped. Morgan collapsed against a crate, gasping. Her leg was soaked with blood. She'd torn the old wound open during the fight, but she was alive. They were all alive. Chen, she said into her phone. Did they get Chen? Negative, Briggs said. He wasn't with the mercenaries. He's gone. Morgan closed her eyes. Chen had escaped. After everything, after all the evidence they'd gathered, he'd slipped away. We'll find him, Morrison said weakly. It's what we do. Morgan wasn't so sure. The congressional hearing room was packed. Cameras, journalists, government officials. Morgan sat at the witness table in her dress uniform, medals gleaming under the lights. The committee chairman gavelled for silence. Staff Sergeant Cross, thank you for your testimony today. Your investigation into David Chen's activities has been invaluable. Morgan nodded. Over the past 6 months, they dismantled Chen's entire network, arrested 12 co-conspirators, including 2 Pentagon officials and a sitting senator, recovered classified documents showing 8 years of intelligence sales that had compromised dozens of operations. But Chen himself remained at large. Last sighting was in Pakistan, probably across the border in Afghanistan by now, protected by the same terrorist networks he'd served. The committee recognizes the extraordinary service you and Master Sergeant Briggs have provided, the chairman continued. Your actions have exposed corruption at the highest levels of our military and government. You have our thanks. Applause filled the room. Morgan stood, shook hands with the committee members. Briggs rolled his wheelchair up beside her, and they exited together. Outside, Morrison was waiting. Good testimony in there. Thanks. I have something for you. Morrison handed her a folder. New assignment, Colonel at Fort Bragg, falsifying readiness reports, taking kickbacks from contractors. Sound familiar? Morgan took the folder. Another case, another corrupt officer, another investigation. You don't have to take it, Morrison said. You've done enough. You could retire, take your pension, live a normal life. Morgan looked at Briggs. He shrugged. Your call, Valkyrie. She thought about the Korengal Valley, about the cave where she'd nearly died, about all the soldiers who had died because people like Wade and Holbrook and Chen had betrayed them. She thought about the iron price. Some prices you paid once, some prices you paid forever. I'll take the case, Morgan said. Morrison smiled. I knew you would. They walked out into the D.C. afternoon. Somewhere in the distance, Arlington National Cemetery held thousands of soldiers who'd paid the ultimate price. Men and women who'd trusted their leaders and died for that trust. Morgan had survived. She'd lived when others had died. That came with a responsibility. To keep fighting, to keep hunting, to make sure no more soldiers died because someone had sold them out. It wasn't the war she'd expected to fight, but it was the war she had, and she'd fight it until the day she died. Briggs rolled alongside her. Where to next? Fort Bragg, tomorrow. You coming? Wouldn't miss it, he paused. You know we'll never catch all of them, right? There will always be another traitor, another investigation. I know. And you're okay with that? Morgan thought about her father, about the Zippo lighter he'd carried through Desert Storm. She still had it in her pocket. She thought about all the soldiers who'd come before her, who'd fought their wars and paid their prices. She thought about the iron price and what it really meant. Yeah, she said quietly. I'm okay with that. They walked toward the parking lot, 2 broken soldiers still fighting their war. The sun was setting over D.C., painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Somewhere out there, David Chen was still free, still selling secrets, still getting soldiers killed. But Morgan Cross was still hunting, and she'd never stop. Some wars end with treaties and parades. Some wars never end at all. This was one of those wars, and Morgan had made her peace with that. The iron price was paid. The mission continued. It always would.